Welcome to another episode of the Distil-Nation podcast. My name's Tom, and I'm joined with my friend Cameron. Hi, Cameron.
It's great to be here. Always talking New Zealand spirits, championing this growing industry. Love it.
I love it as well. Today, we're talking about a really big New Zealand spirit. Something that's totally exploded.
Just in the last 5 years has just become a behemoth of a category in and of its own.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's gin. We're talking about gin. And I think if you're anywhere in the world, you've seen this explosion of people wanting to get their hands on more and more different types of gin. And New Zealand is a really incredible, what's the word? You know, it's just, there's just so much of it. Like there's so many different things you can try. So today, I thought it'd be a good idea if maybe we just give an overview. And it's kind of hard to do. It's really hard to do because of just how many there are and how many styles there are. But like, you know, if I was to say New Zealand gin to you, what do you think?
I think it's big. And of course, you've got your typical London dry or dry style, of which you can find so many. But once we get beyond the basics of what you would expect a gin to be, the category just goes bananas. And you can get, you know, all stuff that is meant to taste like chocolate, and then there's all sorts of infusions and botanicals and styles, and it is just, basically, you can go for days. So we're not going to turn this into a 3-hour podcast.
No.
We'll try and rein it in.
Yeah.
But from a distilled spirits Aotearoa perspective, is there a terminology of what actually constitutes a New Zealand gin?
So no, there actually is not a definition from Distilled Spirits Aotearoa. Gin, as a professional association, it's so broad that it just hasn't actually. It's almost too difficult to define it, you know? So it's already regulated by these international agreements, a lot of free trade agreements. Of course, there's food and safety standards. Those ones already say it's got to, you know, gin's got to be a spirit with the taste that gin should have, basically, you know, which is juniper, basically. That's the rule. It's got to have juniper in it. And that's it, really. So New Zealand doesn't have a rule. There's no rule.
Now, so just to get a little bit contentious for a second, it could mean that somebody is, they're mashing and then they're distilling and they've got their own unique botanical blends and you know, they are doing everything from scratch. Equally, it could mean that somebody buys in a blank neutral spirit, potentially from within New Zealand, equally potentially from overseas, and then put their own spin on it, run it through their own still with some botanicals. Yeah. So whether or not you're doing it from scratch, or you've bought a neutral spirit from within New Zealand, and again, it could be grain, it could be whey, it could be
sugar,
or you're getting that same neutral spirit from outside of New Zealand, and so long as it, sees the inside of a still and has some juniper, it could be a New Zealand gin.
There's another point. There's no definition there still. So even if I was to buy in spirit from overseas and process it here, maybe not redistill it, just process it somehow, maybe just add some botanicals to it, make a bathtub gin, for example.
Okay.
Is that a New Zealand spirit? You know, and this is a different episode.
Whew.
We just opened up Pandora's box.
Big can of worms. Big can of worms.
But no, so whether or not you make it from scratch in New Zealand, you buy the spirit already made in New Zealand, or you buy the spirit already made from overseas, and then you turn it into a gin and bottle it here in New Zealand, that's New Zealand gin at the moment. So This is the huge dictionary, if you will, the huge canvas maybe that we have to look at. And I'm talking hundreds and hundreds of gins. Like this.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's increasing by hundreds every year. Because in 2021, the Guide to New Zealand Gin, the book that they've written, it's an incredible book. These gin guides, if you want to go find them online, they're worth looking at. But the year next, 2022, I believe there was something like 130 new gins added just from one year to the next, which is just insane.
At some point, and perhaps this is a question that we'll come back to at the end of the episode, but it comes back to how many is too many, and at what point is the market going to step in and say, okay,
yeah,
let's take a step back. Now, in some cases, because people might think, hey, hang on, isn't this a whiskey podcast? No, it's New Zealand spirits, and we do want to champion that. But of course, you, as well as making New Zealand whiskey, also make gin.
Yep.
Now, there are lots of distilleries around the world, not unique to New Zealand. They want to make whiskey. Mm-hmm. Whiskey, by definition, has to be aged. Yep. And while you're waiting to build up a stockpile of aged product, gin is a way to get that cash flow going. Absolutely. So there are a number of distilleries who are making whiskey. I mean, Cadrona is one.
Yep.
Set out wanting to make a premium whiskey. What do we do in the meantime? Let's release a range of gin and vodkas. Reefton is another great example. Yep. Slightly different example here in Christchurch, where within the one distillery you've got two labels, that you've got Divergence whiskey, yep. But same team, same still, same house. They've also got Curiosity Gin.
Yep.
So gin and whiskey quite often do go hand in hand.
Mm. And I think what we see a lot of with New Zealand gins is most people, if you're a semi-large distillery, I mean large, I don't know how you define that, right? Like
in a New Zealand context.
In a New Zealand context, yeah. Most of these distilleries are coming up with a lineup of gins, right? So they usually will have their usual London Dry style gin, followed by maybe something sweeter, usually something's fruitier, right? And sometimes there'll be a barrel aged or something like that. With usually a few more, variations, of course. But I think the London Dry style, of course, is the one that's blown up. It's blown up around the world. And I just wonder, what is New Zealand almost bringing to that scene? Because it's one thing that you can get around the world. But here in New Zealand, I mean, we're a unique little island. Are we bringing something unique to the gin scene?
We have to be looking at, one, the sheer number, both distilleries and releases. But also a couple of years ago, I managed to win tickets to go to the Gin-Indulgence Festival. Yeah, beautiful, yeah. And again, so this was a great day, sunny day, out at a lovely venue in Christchurch. It was outdoors, and you had all of these tents with all these people, and I made a point of going around and talking to people, and then sampling all these gins. And it's fair to say that there was such a wide variety in terms of what they're being offered. Is the classic dry style offering something different? Clearly, because I saw so many of these gins and distilleries had won awards, had won international awards. Yep. So clearly they're doing something. As for what that is, I do not know.
I think the key to New Zealand's gin success is the botanicals available to us in New Zealand that you can't get anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
And I think like Manuka flower, Manuka wood, whatever it is, Manuka honey. I've seen all three used in gins. There's Kanuka, there's Horopito. There's so many different ones.
I love a Horopito gin, and that was what drew me to, because it was one of these classic, like and comment kind of competitions, which I did through Number 8 Distillery out of Dunedin.
Yes, yeah.
And they have got this Horopito Fire gin, and that was one I did kind of feel like, hey, I won the tickets from this distillery, I should really buy something from theirs, but also that one in particular was a standout on the day from all that I had tried. So Julian and the team in Dunedin at Number 8, again, they're doing a great job.
Some incredible spirits out of Number 8, and like very unique spirits as well. You don't find anywhere else. But horopito, if anybody doesn't know, is New Zealand bush pepper, and it's like a leaf, right?
Yes.
It's a small bush plant. It's very twiggy, but the leaves are sort of broad and small, maybe 5 centimeters sort of thing. And when you taste them, when you bite into them, they're very peppery, spicy. So they do have a bit of medicinal use, I believe. But yeah, their taste in food is it's really nice. Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Is that looking to what you're doing here at Herrick Creek, where you do have a range of whiskey and you're making corn whiskey, single malt whiskey? You did have a moonshine range and then decided to come up with some gins. So what was the decision-making process? Both are an unaged spirit.
Yep.
Both have a corn base, or your gin's got the barley base?
So actually the gin came first.
Okay.
Interestingly enough. I shouldn't say that. Maybe they came at the same time. But the plan for Herrick Creek at the beginning was to make whiskey and gin. Moonshine was not at all in the cards. It was not in my mind whatsoever. It was an idea from a family member that sort of spiraled now. And now Herrick Creek has become a moonshine, whiskey, and gin distillery in that order. And the gin, though, I wanted to make something really unique. I just thought to myself, there's enough gin out there. And I can't really add too much to it. I'm not a huge gin drinker personally. So for me to go out there and make a London dry gin, what am I really bringing, And I have made one. There was one around for a while. Moose Lake was our dry gin. And I really liked it. It was a good dry gin. But I personally just felt it wasn't bringing anything new to the market. So
sure.
I've sunset that one. 9 Fathoms, on the other hand, sitting on the table here. That one's I've had since day one. And that is a Navy strength 57% gin that I make from both corn, barley, wheat, whatever's going through the still for whiskey goes into that bottle for gin.
Right.
So it's a way to not waste our alcohol. I get to make the alcohol from scratch. I get to rectify it in something semi-neutral. And I say semi-neutral because I really like the grain flavor. It's almost the 10th botanical in our gin. But we can get to that anyway. On the table today, anyway, since we're now talking about it, we've got 2 gins. My own gin, Herrick Creek 9 Fathoms, which is a Navy strength Canterbury gin, is what I call it. And then we've got Humdinger's.
Yes, now this is their bourbon barrel aged. So I think it's a little bit unfair, given I just checked their website recently, and this one had sold out. So it's a seasonal release, limited release. So I'm confident that they will have it back in stock again.
Yeah.
But I picked this one up from the Salador in Geraldine, which is south of Christchurch, heading inland. It is a wonderful wee distillery, and I had a great afternoon mid-January talking with the distiller, Andrew, there, and definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew is partner. They're both working on it, and it's a beautiful little spot they have in Geraldine there. So if you're ever heading through Geraldine, please stop in and see them.
Well, that was so. Well, given that this is 43, that one's 57. Let's start.
Let's start with that one, eh?
So I bought 2 bottles that day. One is their citrus gin, and that was my favourite. So I grabbed that one, and that's one of their core releases that you're able to get. And then this one here, which is their classic but aged in a ex-bourbon barrel.
In fact, it's a Barton 1792 bourbon barrel. If you want to know, if anybody's really geeking out about that, I've looked it up.
Now that was. We had gone to Dunedin, we then stopped off in Wanaka, and it's about 5 and a bit, 6-ish hour drive from Wanaka back to Christchurch in the holiday period. And I turned to my wife and I said, we've got 2 small children in the back of the car, do we really want to try and drive 6 hours and just power that out in one day?
You're a brave man, that's for sure.
Frankly, we said no. No, we don't want to do that. We were looking, okay, well, where can we break up our stop? Geraldine, let's do that. And then as soon as I started looking up for things in Geraldine and I came across Humdinger and said, yes, I want to go in there. So I say it's on the main street. There really is only one kind of main street going through Geraldine. Very small town. And it's just set back. It's in an industrial kind of area, and you go down a wee driveway to kind of, it's set back from the road.
Yeah.
But they've got a mural on the side street so that, it says Humdinger this way. And then the inside is very welcoming. They've got a tasting area, and Andrew was incredibly welcoming as well, that just, coming in there, asking questions, looking through the window. The still area is closed off behind glass. But, I'm asking questions and looking at all of that, and had a thoroughly good afternoon talking to him. What was also great to see was that in the time, and clearly I was geeking out, and he was very patient with me talking about stills and all of those technical stuff, but there was a steady stream of people coming in, and I'm pretty sure everybody who came in tried a couple. There's nobody that walked out empty-handed.
Oh, it's good. It's good to hear. Yeah. One thing to note on these bottles, both of them are 500ml bottles. That's something you see a bit more common in gins, for sure.
Well, certainly this one being more of a limited edition.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't know much about barrel-aged gin. I've seen a few of them around, and as I'm tasting this right now, I sort of get a little bit of that barrel influence, just like the subtlest bit, But
and I mean, if I pick these up for a second,
you can definitely.
That one is completely clear, and that one has got the slightest of amber hues.
As if you put a tea in for the smallest amount of time.
It looks like an incredibly weak tea.
Yeah. But wow, the flavor on that, like that citrus, really comes through.
It's almost with the that barrel influence. So again, clearly that it's not very dark, so it can't have spent a lot of time in that barrel.
I can tell you it was 4 months.
There you go. But it's almost like a candied citrus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very sweet. But then there's this beautiful spice, and I'm trying to pick apart without reading too much into the page here, but that sweet and spiciness works really well together in this gin. Yeah.
Now I hope I don't get Andrew in trouble for saying this. There was while we were talking, up on the wall they've got a beautiful display wall, and you can see the botanicals that they use, and they've also got bottles of their releases up on the wall, that are hard mounted to the wall as displays.
Right.
And a woman came in and was wanting to try everything, and said, "Oh, I see you've got a slow there. I love slow gin. Can I buy a bottle?" And he says, "No, we've sold out. I'm afraid we don't have any of that left." As is the case with limited releases in these kinds of things. And so he was still talking to her, and then she left. And Andrew goes under the table and pulls out a bottle of the slow gin and pours me a wee sample and hands it over. And he said, "This genuinely is the last bottle that we have." That it was, open, and I think he said that they had sent their last full bottle away to be considered for an award. But yes, so it's not like I walked out of there with something, but I did get the opportunity to try it, and it was a lovely, and it's fruity. Honestly, with this one as well, genuinely, I think it's a shame to put tonic in something like this.
Oh, absolutely. This is a drinking straight kind of gin. It's beautiful.
Yes.
And what was it? 43%. It's not too bad, as far as going for alcohol. And I think just as is, you could definitely enjoy that. And I'm just trying to think. He's got here that they suggest it with some imperial ginger ale over ice, or in a hot toddy. some interesting choices. I like.
Well,
that.
certainly with it is very citrus forward.
Yeah,
both nose and taste, very citrus forward. And that's personally I wouldn't, but I totally understand why he would suggest putting a ginger ale over a tonic.
Now that I've said ginger ale, though,
Yep.
this actually almost smells like ginger ale. But like the really spicy kinds of ginger ale, like
I'd say it's like Moscow Mule, heavy
Yes.
with the kind of lime juice.
yes,
It's like that.
yeah,
But we haven't added any mixes to it.
exactly, yeah. I really like that.
So, sorry you can't buy this right now as of time of recording, but I'm confident that they will have.
I'm sure there's more barrels aging, and they usually do that pretty often, I think. But that was 390 or 360 bottles on that batch by the looks of it.
Humdinger is one to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
I'm not going to speak out of turn on here, but I was talking with Andrew, and a question that I hope we get the chance to ask both of him and of other distillers is what's next, what's coming out.
Absolutely.
And he's telling me that they are definitely playing around with other botanicals and other gin recipes. This Humdinger started as a gin distillery with the intention of being a gin distillery.
Yeah.
But we can look forward to other spirits coming out of there.
Oh, can we?
So, no idea about timeline, but from what he was telling me, yes, they do have a mind to start releasing other spirits. So I hope that we can have Andrew on so that we can ask him about it.
Absolutely. I'm just looking really quickly at the website here, and they do have a yuzu gin coming soon.
Oh,
that's interesting. As well as the slow gin that you so
got that taste of.
Yeah, nobly denied that woman a tasting of. That is returning soon, it says. So there you go. But they've also got some other cool sold out ones like pink gin and cherry gin liqueur. Sounds quite as good as well. So, I mean, the size they are, and they're using a beautiful. Two beautiful stills, I believe.
Yes.
German-made Carl.
Oh, he was telling me all about... Because it was a weird... It looked... and I hope we can put up a picture. Because I'm looking at it and I'm saying it looks like it's trying to decide whether it's a pot still or a column still. And he said, yes, it was intentional by design, and it really gives them the best of both worlds to play around with it.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of them before, and they are... beautiful pieces of equipment. Actually, I've just found some pictures here. We'll definitely put a picture up on the video. But if you want to know, go to the Humdinger website. It's just humdinger.nz. And it looks like they've got three. They've got a 220 litre still, which is about the same size as my still Eddie here. They've got one called the Refiner, which is a 50 litre still. I've also got another one sitting right there. It's 50 litres. And they've got a little 3 litre they call the Developer. But they're beautiful. They look absolutely beautiful. Yeah.
And it's Geraldine is used to be kind of like where you would stop to stretch your legs on your way through down to the main holiday hotspot of Central Otago. The other reason to stop, well, the original reason to stop was Barker's, which is a company that makes jams and preserves and sauces and things. So it used to be you'd stop in Geraldine, you'd go to Barker's, carry on down to Central Otago, stop on the way back. Humdinger is fast making Geraldine a destination in and of itself that you would want to go to and visit. It was just, honestly, it was a lovely place to stop, spend some time, to grab a bottle of this, and then the unit where we were staying had a lovely kind of back porch led out into a garden, an area for the kids to run around, to sit out there with a couple of ice cubes and a generous pouring of the Humdinger citrus gin.
Yeah.
Bang, that was my summer afternoon.
It's pretty idyllic, that. It sounds idyllic.
It was.
I just got to say, the way they've set up that distillery, just like the touches of that they've done, the signage, and just like the way that everything's done in there, is just done to a point of such workmanship. It just looks so good. So kudos to them.
Very much so. Like walking in, yes, it is a working distillery, and you can see all of that there. But you're right. It's those professional touches that they have added to that welcome area where the bar, where it's meant to be a tasting kind of place.
Yeah.
They've created a very welcoming, very inviting space and a range of quality spirits as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so the second spirit we brought on today is my own, which, I mean, I did reluctantly, I gotta say. I did a little reluctantly, because I feel like we're only on the second episode of Distil-Nation, right? And I don't want to make it, I know we're here at the distillery. I know the distillery is sponsoring the podcast, but I don't want it to be all about my spirits. You know, this is about the whole industry, right?
True, but you have a story to tell, and 9 Fathoms, why the name? Where did that come from?
So 9 Fathoms is a small passage of water down in Dusky Sound, which is down in Fiordland, which is at the very bottom of New Zealand, in a very remote area. And 9 Fathoms, that passage there, is a spot well known for moose sightings in the past. And if you don't know, which we haven't talked about yet,
No.
Herrick Creek is based on, the whole brand is based on the South Island moose tail. And so if you ever wondered if there were moose in New Zealand, yes, at one point there were. And maybe
introduced for hunting.
Introduced for hunting, and then they were hunted. Even a few of them have definitely been hung up. But yeah, it was found that there probably wasn't as big a population as they thought after being introduced. And after 1953, nobody's had a confirmed sighting of a moose. So now it's become a bit of a Sasquatch down in Southland, if you will. You know? Is the moose there or not?
Are they still out there?
And I mean, every year you always hear one hiker or hunter or something who says, "I saw the moose. I saw the moose, and I couldn't get my camera out in time." You know, so are they there? We don't know. Anyway, 9 Fathoms. The gin itself, as I've previously mentioned, we make it from our alcohol, whiskey alcohol. It is infused for about a week with the botanicals, 9 botanicals. And I do have them written on the side of the bottle because I'm really good at forgetting what they are. Because there's so many. Juniper berries, coriander seeds, angelica root, lemon peel, orange peel, New Zealand hops, kiwi fruit, horpedo, and cucumber. So that's where we come in for our botanicals. 1 week of maceration, and then I pot distill it. No plates or anything like that, just one simple pot distillation, and it's proofed down to 57%.
So how did you land on that recipe?
I spent a long time out in the bush, if you will. You know, I used to do a ton of hiking before I owned a business, and now I don't have any time. And excuse me. At that time, as I was going through the bush, and New Zealand's very new to me, it was just natural for me to touch and smell everything, right? So, and I did notice a few times, especially when I was either on like the west coast or down south, there was just the smell of New Zealand forest, you know, and I haven't been able to capture that. I have to admit that. But I did want to do what I could to encapsulate New Zealand somehow in gin. So it had to be as many New Zealand botanicals as I could, and I'm pretty sure the lemon, the orange, the hops, the kiwi fruit, the horpedo, and maybe the cucumber, I'm trying to remember, but at least 4 or 5 of them are New Zealand botanicals grown here. And I wanted to have a spice, I wanted to have a sweetness, but I wanted it to be a whiskey drinker's gin as well. I wanted it to be something that you pour this in your glass at the end of the day, and you're just going to drink it like a whiskey almost. And some people do. Some people put it with tonic, which it holds up very nicely in a tonic.
That has to be said. I think both the intensity of the botanicals and coming in at 57 means that you can add tonic to this and it's not getting washed out.
The amount of oils, like botanical oil in this, is actually nuts, because right now it's very cold in the distillery, and I've got a batch that's unlabeled over there, and actually you can see the flock in it. Like if you look at the rye whiskey over here, you can see flock in some of these ryes. That's very normal for whiskey. You know, you see those fats and oils congeal into a little cloud. In whiskey, that's very normal, but in gin, I've actually never seen it happen before until this batch of gin. It's sitting over there with little clouds in it. And all you have to do, of course, is safe. It just means there's more oils. You just give it a shake, and it all goes back out of suspension. But it's just proof of the oils in it, which I'm really happy about.
And for me, gin is not my first choice, my first choice of spirit. But that being said, I do have a couple of gins in my cupboard. It's certainly, my wife doesn't drink whiskey, but she does enjoy gin.
Yep.
And this was one that I just fell in love with and said, yes, when you said that this is the whiskey drinker's gin, I think that was one of the reasons that drew me to this in the first place.
Marketing.
That and your use of Horopito. I think if there is a thread to be pulled, it's me liking that number 8 Horopito fire and then falling in love with 9 Fathoms.
And I think the Horopito does have a prominent role in the gin. I don't use very much Horopito, but it's definitely this nice spice, and it hits you. But then I think the rest of it sort of hits this beautiful citrusy sweet almost, along with that kind of grassy hop flavor and a little bit of grain, on the back there, which the grain could be the 10th botanical if you want. But it changes every batch, unfortunately, so it's not one I can easily tell you which grain is in this one. But it would be corn, I can tell you for sure, for this batch.
For this batch.
Yeah.
See, and that's... I think there is... I mean, it does come in hot, 57, and there's definitely... It's telling me that it's up there. Yeah. But you can treat this like a whiskey, put in an ice cube, put in a couple of drops of water, because it is... There are layers here, there are oils in here. You can treat this more as a whiskey in terms of how you nose and drink it.
Absolutely. I'm just looking at the legs on the glass. There's definitely there. It's a thick spirit, It's very viscous. Like you can chew this, really. Couldn't you? I mean, it is... out of all my spirits, except for maybe my whiskey, I'm most proud of this spirit. It took many, many batches in the early days to get this recipe dialed in correctly. And still occasionally I get an odd batch that I do improperly and I have to redistill, It's a very difficult gin, and it's not for everybody. I gotta say this. No. Yeah, it's bold. It's and it's strong at 57%. There's not a lot of Navy strength gin in New Zealand. We should mention that too. In that New Zealand guide to gin, there's actually very few pages for Navy strength. I think there's maybe half a dozen out of all the gins in New Zealand, all the gin brands. And I don't know if it's because alcohol, liquor stores don't sell a lot of it. They don't want it, which I've been told a couple of times. It's just too strong sometimes in stores for some people. Or is it just a matter of not knowing much about the category or what it is? I'm not sure.
To take an even more cynical approach, does it come back to taxes? And actually, if you want to earn a good margin on that bottle, you can sell more bottles if it's 43 versus 57.
100%. Yeah. If you dilute them, you get more bottles. If you dilute it, you pay less tax. To be honest, I can't dilute this past about 50% without it clouding up because of the oils. It louches, which some people would call an imperfection, but I quite like. It's just proof, again, of the oils in it. But, yeah.
I'm going to add just a couple of... And what I love is that those water droplets hit the whiskey and you see the oils break apart and there's that burst. It is very, very...
I see what you mean. I've never actually put the water in, but actually 100%, there it goes. That's quite cool.
Oh, and that just... It opens it up. Yeah, it must be said, it's not particularly warm in the distillery today.
Yeah.
It does make a difference. But it is so...
We could easily sit there, I think, for an evening.
Oh, yes.
Like a glass of whiskey,
Yep.
and just pick it apart and enjoy it, and...
Multi-note, multi-layered, and certainly once you add that water, it just opens up and it becomes... It's not... some... Gins are made to be that, very, very sweet. Add in your tonic to kind of provide the contrast, and you can consume them fairly quickly and without thinking on a summer's day.
Yeah,
this is not that.
No. You've really got to prepare for this, isn't it? Get the family out of the house. You've got to get the chair set up perfectly. The lights have to be dimmed. The window shades might have to be adjusted. That armchair's got to be just about right. And you've got to have just everything set up and ready to go before you take that first sip.
You can... this is certainly one you'd write pages in your tasting notebook.
But that's what I wanted from it. And I hope that's sort of what comes across. I certainly enjoy it, and that's kind of all that matters to me. I don't make a ton of it, you know. It's I do call it a seasonal release thing. We only do a few batches a year. This being our biggest batch ever. This is batch 10, yeah. And we had to do some for a local group, and luckily I had some leftovers. So we had about 35 bottles left over. That's usually a whole batch, 35 bottles. This batch was much larger, about 100 bottles. It's a ton of work to make it. It shows a little bit, I think, in the price tag, unfortunately, you know. And this is a conversation we can definitely have with some of these spirits in the future. The prices will vary by where you look at, you know, stuff around the country and around the world. But you know, when you're looking at spirits and you're in the hobby of spirits and whatnot, price is a big factor, you know.
Yeah.
And for us, 57%, it's 500 mils. You know, there's a lot of tax, there's a lot of time, there's a lot of botanicals that go into it. So, yeah.
And I think just bringing this conversation around full circle, your 9 Fathoms, and both here with that bourbon barrel aged, it is something different. Whether you want to call it a novelty, it's certainly something that is going to make you sit up, take notice, and go, okay, wow, that is a variation from the norm. And there are plenty of gin distilleries around New Zealand that are coming up with wacky and wild flavours or incredibly different botanicals who are doing something new and innovating.
Yeah.
But coming around full circle, you know, a distillery is only going to exist so long as people continue to buy that product.
Yeah.
Budgets only go so far, and it doesn't help that the excise tax apparently is linked to inflation and will continue to keep going up so long as inflation continues to rise.
Yeah.
So that is going to put pressure on this massive explosion. I think we can, in future, I think we can expect both a shrinking in terms of the offering,
Yep.
But also in the number of distilleries that we have around New Zealand.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to see this year, because I sort of base all this on this guide to New Zealand gin,
Right.
the New Zealand Guide to Gin. I wonder,
Which 9 Fathoms is featured in,
it is
by the
absolutely,
way.
yeah. It was a taster's pick for 2021, I must mention.
Yep.
But anyway, I'm interested to see this year how much it grows. Is it as much, or is it going to shrink, or what's going to happen with it? Because I'm wondering, when do we hit peak gin? You know,
Yep.
when's peak gin industry, and then what happens? You know, so yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff going on, and I'm really excited that we get to try a bunch of them. I mean, we got some London Dries we'll try. There's certainly those weird and wacky ones. You know, I'd love to get my hands on some of them. And there's seafood ones. You know, the seaweed ones.
Yes, I've tried Distil-Nation out of Wellington. I think they do a wakame seaweed, which is very interesting. There was another one out of Wellington that does the rosemary.
Yes, the smoked rosemary one. Yeah,
That was just
that's southward, if anybody's wondering. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting gin. There, it's quite cool. I mean, there's Kaikoura, Mount Fife Distillery. They're doing a seaweed gin as well. Ald, their oyster gin, right?
Yes.
It's an ocean sort of gin, is what they've said, right? So, yeah, we've got a lot to explore.
There's a lot to explore. Have we reached peak gin yet? I don't think we have.
Yeah.
But I do think it's clear that there is still a lot of love for the category.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be a place like the Juniper Collective, you know, a store here in Christchurch that really does champion New Zealand gins in particular, which is great to have a place like that and people who are willing to do that. But yes, I think it will only be another year or two before
Something's got to give.
Yeah,
right?
something's got to give. The category itself is just going to be too crowded.
It is. It's big, and of course, it is fairly easy to start a distillery in New Zealand. You know, you can do it in your garage, really, if you want. But yeah, at some point there's only so much gin that people can consume, right? And on a certain scale of production, it's not really you can't really ship it overseas and stuff like that as well. So I'm excited to see what we see, and I think these two that we've tried today are great. The Humdinger one, I don't think I've tried the barrel aged one, and I really enjoyed that. I got to say, beautiful expression, yeah.
So it's a category that continues to grow. As we've said in the beginning, there's a lot of controversy as well.
Yep.
It's going to be pinned down at some point, but it's an exciting spirits category in New Zealand.
Hugely exciting, yeah. And I mean, the fact that we get to explore some of these, I mean, the episodes we could do on this. I mean, we could have, if we're going to do one category of gin, gosh, we could have like dozens in one episode, but we can't, of course, too, because, there's only so much time we can chat about stuff. But, there's so many. So many. I think I've said that enough times. Anyway, thank you so much, everyone, for listening, for watching. If you want to learn more about us, distilnation.nz is our website, distilnationnz@gmail.com. Distil-Nation.nz at all the socials, and please keep an eye out on your podcast websites for more episodes. And if you have questions, please reach out to that email address or in our socials. We're here to answer any questions. There's no stupid questions. So
No.
That's our doorbell. So we're going to wrap it up on that note. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
Cheers.